Coffer slab section, and this is because, as I said, I'm not in PE, and I just felt that with us having our assessment next week that I needed to do this, otherwise I would have had to cancel this class, which is something I would not particularly want to do. And from where I'm sitting, there also is no guarantee that the connectivity would last us and that the connectivity would be such that I would be able to present this class for you tomorrow, as I also have to do some other stuff for the dean and the faculty. I will now be uploading the drawing that we had worked with, and I'll be uploading the section that deals with the coffer slab, and I'm sharing my screen as you would see on your sections there now. And I need to, and as I upload this, as you can see there, I'm showing the drawing and the section that I would be doing at this time, that I would be working on, that we would be measuring, would be that section that you see circled now for my coffer slab. In order for us to measure that, there are certain aspects that we obviously have to take note of. Number one, when we look at this drawing, we would know that I have already measured to that beam over there. I therefore have to measure everything. Maybe I should use a different color, and when using the red, we'd have to measure everything on that side, as you can see on the drawing that I'm reflecting there. Again, our heights that we have, we would be working with a height of 18.05, which is top of the floor slab, to a height of 14.25. And when I do my deduction, I notice that my height there, including the slab thickness, would be 3.8 meters. So we will then be working with whatever the dimensions are leading up to the top of my pile cap. So looking at that, going through all of that, I obviously need to start out by indicating that in my description, I need to indicate in my description when looking at that, I would have to start and indicate the following. And my description would start out by saying that the following in my coffer slab. That is like a subheading that I would have here. And we would then have to go in and say that my reinforced concrete, which is 25 MPa, 19 millimeter stone, in coffer slab, and beams, including inverted beams. We all know that my slab thickness here is given to me as 400, and my overall dimensions, as I can see from this here, would be, as I then make my way to determining that, my overall dimensions would be 5 meters, by 9 meters. So it will be 5 meters by 9 meters by my thickness of 400. That's the overall thickness that I have for my coffer slab. That will be the dimensions for my slab. Looking at my beams, I have to ensure that for my beams, I then have my 5 meters, which is the overall width. I've also seen that my width of my beams would be 300 wide as well as 300 high, and I would have 2 of those. Also have my dimension of 8 meter 400 by my 300 by my 300, which goes 2 of those, and that is for my beams, and that then goes between that and that is where I get my 8 meter 400 from. But of course, I have measured, but I need to deduct that. And I'm showing that as a cross through, meaning that would have to be taken out. So I therefore in my dimension column would then say my deduction would therefore be, as I take the dimensions for my coffers, my dimension for my coffers is shown to me as 900 at the bottom, 900 and 750. And therefore, my dimension would be, for what I need to deduct, would be I would take my 750, add my 900, and divide that by 2. That gives me 1650 divided by 2, and it gives me 825 millimeters on average. So my deduction would therefore be 0.83, 0.83, and the height that we are given for my coffers are 300, and that is 0.3. And how many coffers do we have? I count 21 of them, and that forms part of the dimension for where I have to measure my concrete. That is all for my coffers. As we all know, looking at that, and having a look at what I see over here, it means that I have now measured my concrete from there to there, and I've measured my concrete from there to there. Guys, I've just realized that I've made a mistake and that I have accidentally measured this beam twice. Now I want to make a note here that this beam, as this is part of the recording, is only measured once and not twice. So my dimension there, therefore, would be 8.4 by 0.3 by 0.3. And the other one was 5 meters by 0.3 by 0.3. And we had two of those because that covered that and that there. Okay. But when I look at, I've already measured the concrete overall from there to there. But I need to now look at the formwork. But the formwork that I need to now look at would be the formwork around the flat section that I am now shading in over there. So my description would read smooth formwork to the sides and the soffits of my beams, which I would measure first. Smooth formwork to sides and soffits of my beams, including propping up, exceeding 1.5 and not exceeding 3.5 meters high. And that would reflect and that would refer to the beams around. And when looking at that, I'll therefore go in and I would say that it is my 5 meters overall dimension. And I would then therefore take my beam, which is 300, and I then have that height there as 400 plus 300. And that gives me in total a girth of 1.3, and I have two of those. Or I could go on and I could say 300 plus 300 plus 300 gives me 0.9. And then I will, of course, have to add in 0.4 for the edge of my slab. And for my vertical side, I would then have to go in and I would then say 8.4 multiplied by 0.9 as well as 9 meters multiplied 0.4, and that is for my edge of my slab. With me? Right. Because when I do my vertical, I would stop that there. Okay. I also look at formwork to the soffits of my Coffer slab. Looking at the formwork to the soffit of my soffit of my Coffer slab, I know my slab thickness exceeds 250, so it'll be exceeding 250, not exceeding 500, with the ribs at 1100 millimeter centers, and I get that from the dimension that I now take from over here. The dimension that I take over here at my 900 plus half of my 200 on the one side and 100 on the opposite side. So that for my ribs would be 900 plus 2 times half times 200. That gives me centers of 1 meter 100. So for my formwork here, I also need to now determine for the formwork to my soffits of my coffers, and I need to look at how many coffers I have one way and how many coffers I have the opposite way. So I know that I have 3 by 900 for my coffers, and I have 2 by 200 for my ribs. That gives me 2 meters 700 plus 400 gives me 3 meter 100. I also have 7 times 900 plus 6 times 200, and that gives me 7 meter 500. So the area for the formwork to the coffers of my, for the soffit of my coffers would therefore be 3 meter 100 multiplied by 7 meter 500. All of that is looking at the height, exceeding 1.5, not exceeding 3.5, and that is the area that is covered for my coffers only. I trust that we are all with me. And I do take this further, however, knowing that I have now measured that. Also noting that I also need to measure the formwork to that section, to the adjacent sections which is there, which now reflects the section that does not get a coffer. So the smooth formwork to the soffits of the adjacent flush surfaces of the coffered slab, exceeding 250 or exceeding 500 millimeters thick, including propping up exceeding 3.5 meters. Because now this changes. Exceeding 3.5 or exceeding 5 meters. And why does it change? My propping up changes because when I have a look at the formwork to the soffit, the support would be from there, and I would therefore have 18.05 minus 14.00. That gives me 4.05, and I then deduct the thickness of my slab of 400, and that gives me 3.65. So my category is exceeding 3.5 and not exceeding 5 meters. That being said, I will first and foremost measure over and then come and deduct the area that I've already measured for my soffit of my coffer slabs. So then I would have 5 meters, because my dimension there is 5 meters. But I would deduct that 300. So it would be 5 meters, deduct 300, not 3 meters. And that leaves me with 4,700. So it will be 4.7 multiplied by 8.4. And I then would deduct the area that I have just measured for the soffit of my coffer slab, which was 3.1 by 7.5. I then go further. And as I go further, I now also have to measure for my individual coffers. And when I measure for the formwork to my coffers, measuring each and every coffer as per the standard system, it says that these are measured in number. I go through and I measure them and I describe them, the size at the top, the size at the bottom, I give the height, and I also say how deep they are. My description then would come, therefore, would be smooth formwork to the top and sides of coffers, size 750 by 750 millimeters at the top, 900 by 900 millimeters at the bottom, and they are all 300 deep. And when I count them there, as I can see on the drawing, as per the engineer, I count them and they indicate that there are 3 in one row and 7 in the other row, and meaning that we have 21 of these coffers. On the standard system, they are measured in number. They're measured in number. I also need to measure, show where I get this from. I also need to now measure that section over there. That section over there we would call a riser, as that is the step up between the one slab, the ribbon block slab, and my coffered slab. And the height of that, the thickness of that there would be 400, deduct 200, and I'm left with a riser of 200 thick. High. So that being 200 high, it falls in the category of not exceeding 300 millimeters high, and therefore it will be measured in meters. That's all according to the standard system. So I then say smooth formwork to riser not exceeding 300 millimeters high, and then that length of mine would then be 9 meters long. We're also told, having measured all of that, we also are told, and this is now part of a side note, that we needed to provide for the amount of 30,000 Rand for the supply and fitting position of the structural steel reinforcement. And we also need to allow for profit as well as attendance, since the contractor also has to have a profit from this, and that is measured in item. Guys, that brings us to the end of the measuring of this drawing. And when dealing with this drawing here, this is the way that we could go forth, and I would be sending an email giving a description of just exactly where we would need to be. Stay safe, guys, and please email me if there are any queries that you might have. And stay safe, and God bless. All the best.